Today I am painting the most complex model I have ever painted, with one of the simplest color schemes I've ever concocted. Hey everyone, Ali here. Today I am excited to finally share a video that I have been sitting on for literally a year. And I guess if you think about it, that goes for all my videos. Anyway, about a year ago, I painted the Canuckmera by Caster, an incredibly weird and grotesque miniature inspired by 3 common animals found in the Canadian wilderness. This model immediately overwhelmed me and gave me a real bad bout of decision paralysis, which I was finally able to break out of by simplifying my process and boiling down my color palette ideas into something simple and clean. And so this long overdue video is all about the beauty of simplicity when you need it the most. Let's dive in, shall we? Let's start way back at the beginning. Caster is a Canadian company manufacturing resin miniatures with absurd levels of detail. For a while I had admired their models from afar, but none of them really spoke to me quite enough to drop money on one. Until the Canuckmera. I should pause here and make 2 things clear. 1, Caster isn't sponsoring this video, I just really enjoyed painting this model. And 2, if you visit their website, there are quite a few models that fall squarely in the 18+ not safe for work category, so please be mindful of that if you go browse their website. Anyway, back in that completely unremarkable year of 2020, Caster hosted a Canuckmera creation campaign where you could pre-order a Canadian Chimera model, help to vote on its features, and then eventually get one sent to you in the mail. I hopped on that bandwagon as a Canada Day treat to myself, and received it just after Thanksgiving of that same year. Canadian Thanksgiving, by the way, October. The Canuckmera in its final form is a grotesque chimera inspired by 3 quintessentially Canadian animals. It's got a moose as its main body, with a beaver kind of stuck in its torso, and a Canada goose serving as the wings and tail? It also has some extra wings and antlers, not to mention skulls, eyes, and screaming faces all throughout its belly and antlers. Just, you know, a normal, pristine creature doing normal things in the forest. When it finally arrived, I was really excited to dig into it and see what these Caster minis were all about. I unboxed it and had a look at all the little fiddly bits it came with, and wow. Wow, I mean, I'd seen all the details on these minis on their website, but seeing one like in person in front of me and realizing just how tiny a lot of these details are really put the work ahead of me into perspective. I realized that this was going to be a significant undertaking. And, you know, this was my first experience with a professionally produced resin model that wasn't just 3D printed and sent to me by a friend, so I had some thinking to do about this. After unboxing all the different bits and bobs and seeing just what the Canuckmera would be entailing, I put everything back into the box and kept this weird and wacky friend tucked away for a very long time because I was real nervous about painting it. Every time I sat down to plan out a color scheme or think about what I wanted to do, I would just blank out and not do it because it seemed so overwhelming. While I was feeling sorry for myself for not being able to come up with something cool for this model, so many cool Canuckmera paint jobs were popping up on the internet, including this incredible one displayed on the Caster website. Each of these models' paint jobs were disgusting and resplendent in their own ways, each with their own elements that really brought something different and new to the table. Usually looking at what others have done in terms of painting their models fills me with inspiration for my own models. But this time, I just kept getting filled with more dread. It just kept, making me intentionally avoid this incredibly cool model instead of approaching it with excitement. What was wrong with me? After this embarrassingly long time of being like this, I thought about it one day and had my weird little epiphany that there's no reason this model needs to be that overwhelming, right? I'm not painting this miniature for a competition or even for bragging rights. I'm just painting this weird, freaky Canadian model for myself to stick on my shelf to say that I did it. So why make it so complicated? Why not just plan to do something simple? After all, like I said, this was my first super complex miniature and my first time painting a larger scale piece with this level of detail. It shouldn't overwhelm me the way I think it is. Instead, shouldn't it just give me permission to just plan something that's approachable, fun, and relatable to me? Yeah, like, why not? So I went into my color planning process fresh with a simple idea. I would keep the colors of the animals themselves nice and simple, basically just like the real life counterparts. And for the base and grotesque bits, I would focus on simple icy frost elements. After all, according to the Creature Caster website, this abomination of nature has escaped Creature Caster's dark underground labs and was last spotted deep in the icy pine forests of Western Canada. So my base palette was this: 2 shades of brown, light tan, aqua blue, and frosty off-white. 5 colors, that's it. From there, I hashed out a quick color scheme using Procreate on my iPad on top of one of the model renders from the Creature Caster website. Folks who are familiar with my channel will know that planning these digital color schemes are a big part of my personal mini painting process. And if you want to know how you can try this technique out for yourself pretty simply, I have a few videos about that I will link down below. Once I finally felt good and confident about my color scheme, sitting down and actually building the model was a whole other adventure that was a bit more complex than I realized. Of course, being a resin model with nearly 30 individual pieces to tidy up and glue together, this should not have been surprising, but you know. First, of course, was popping all the bits off the sprues. After twisting a few off with my hands, I realized the internet would probably yell at me if I kept this up, and I switched to small cutters instead. One of the fiddly bits I really didn't anticipate, just based on lack of experience, was how much trimming, shaving, and cleaning would need to be done on these pieces. There was a few mold lines, but mostly just a lot of flaky leftover resin residue on the model pieces that had to be carefully removed with an X-Acto blade before I could even start the assembly process. It wasn't a huge deal. A lot of it came off really smoothly, way more smoothly than some of the PVC and plastic miniatures I've had to trim seam lines off of. But given the amount of pieces and how careful I had to be, it took a longer time than I realized. Again, not really a complaint, just something I would keep in mind when doing miniatures like this in the future. After a lot of careful study of the admittedly well-illustrated assembly manual, and taking lots of deep breaths, I managed to get the model all glued and put together. In the process, I also used Milliput for the first time to repair a section of the goose's cheek that had a missing chunk out of it upon arrival. I'm told that this is somewhat common with resin miniatures, not a huge deal, and it was such a round area that it was really easy to mold up and sand down. Before beginning to paint, I had the idea to drill small holes into the feet and temporarily attach the feet to an unrolled paper clip secured to my painting handle so that the model could easily be painted from any angle. I didn't film the process of actually doing that, but you'll see my setup on that handle as I work on the model throughout the video. Once we were all built and ready, I hit the model and its base with a coat of black primer and used a wide makeup brush to do a white zenithal dry brush across the entire model just to give myself a better eye for that detail and to make sure they would stand out a bit underneath my base coat. And finally, it was time to start painting properly. Laying down the base color was a relatively simple process. I started by laying down a nice medium brown across the mini's entire body and heads, and some light tan on the antlers. I'd go back later and also add tan on the little antler bits as well. I'm not super worried about being messy at this stage, since it's easy to tidy things up as we go along. After the brown and tan were added, I started filling in all the grotesque bits with a light Arctic blue. This included all the bits on the body with eyes, skulls, and faces popping out, as well as those matching areas on the moose antlers. I liked this little concept forming in my head of all these poor wayward souls being frozen in stasis on the Canuckmera's body in the icy forest. And I gotta be honest, it felt pretty freeing to just lay down a handful of base colors on this enormous detailed model. My smaller models usually have much more base color detail than this, and doing it this way just freed me up to just have fun with it. I painted the inside of their mouths a dark indigo blue and proceeded to add some darker brown accents to some areas of the body, like the feathers on the wings, all along the back of the body and down the tail. I also splashed a slightly lighter blue on parts of the frosty areas to give a little bit of color variance. And I don't know, that was pretty much it. I usually go into a fair amount of detail in my base coat color layer, but I held back this time and the base color was done in record time. When it came to applying the wash layer, I also decided to take a different approach than my usual. Typically for smaller minis, I'll just take the wash and sort of pin wash by carefully applying the wash into crevices and detail areas, but for this model, I went for the old school slap chop method of just applying wash all over the model. After all, there's an extraordinary amount of detail throughout this miniature, if I haven't mentioned that 100 times already, and a big ol' wash is probably one of the easiest ways to bring out that fine detail quickly. Doing it this way can have the side effect of making a model look really grimdark and muddy, but with this model, I intend to spend most of my time on just refining the finer details and highlights, so it won't really remain grimdark for long. I used Citadel Agrax Earthshade for all of the brown and tan bits, and Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade for the blue bits. Again, nice and simple, 2 washes, that's it. And finally, the mini was ready for the main event, all the fine detail work. To start working on the finer details, I began with using a smaller brush to dry brush bluish-white highlights onto the icy areas of the model. I also put a little bit of icy blue dry brush highlight onto some of the raised areas of the faces, feet, and wingtips of the model to give it kind of an overall frost-kissed kind of look. I also went across the brown areas of the model with a dark tan dry brush, including putting a stripe of tan coloring across the wings. With the basic dry brush step complete, I took my trusty tiny size 0 brush and started working on adding little fine details all over the model. This also included small areas of pin washing, as well as selecting areas to give bold highlights to, such as a stronger white finish on some of the skulls and those eyes coming out of the frosty goo. I also took time to add detail to the eyes, teeth, and tongues of each of the animals' faces to make sure they popped. This is typically actually my favorite part of the mini painting process. It can be incredibly tedious, for sure. I think on this model, the fine details alone took me about 6 to 7 hours. I definitely cut it down significantly for this video. But the fine details bring so much out of any miniature, and especially with a model with as fine details as this one. I want someone who's looking at this model to just keep noticing tiny little details that they may not have noticed previously. And even so, I kept the fine detail part of this mini relatively simple. I didn't want to go crazy with every single little detail. I wanted to do my normal process of really focusing on the fine details that I think would really pop. Oh, and this whole time, I was also puttering at the base of the model, but I forgot to film a decent chunk of that specific process, so I'll go over it now. For the rocks, I went full frost mode, just using similar colors to the model's Arctic bits. Lots of Arctic blue, Drakenhof Nightshade for wash, and a bunch of icy white highlights on top. The water was actually one of my favorite parts of this whole piece. For the water, I used a bright aqua blue inspired by the lakes in many alpine regions. And the waterfall, that little waterfall there, was actually my favorite part of the entire piece. It took me a little while to fuss around with it and get it just right, but I think I nailed that just frothy, flowing waterfall look. Once everyone was painted and I had a final once-over, I applied a simple matte varnish to the model, along with some semi-gloss varnish for the interior of the mouths and for the waterfall. And with that, the Canuckmera was finally completed. After literally years of decision paralysis, Choosing to keep this model simple in terms of scope and color palette paid off, and I am still extremely pleased with the outcome of this model. It wouldn't come close to winning any competitions, but who cares? As far as my first large detailed miniature goes, it gets a gold medal in my books. Not counting the time taken to build it, this model took approximately 10 hours from start to finish, which is not bad at all for something of this scale. This video wasn't intended as a tutorial as much as a, hey, it's okay to simplify your idea. It'll look great no matter what. There's a certain beauty in a simple color scheme that's easy on the eye, and now this Canuckmera sits on a place of pride on my shelf. So hey, you, yes, you, there. Grab one of those minis in your pile that you keep putting off for fear of screwing it up. Simplify your process, paint, and have fun. I can't wait to see what you do. If you have a story that's similar to this one, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Let me know what you did to simplify your process when you were facing decision paralysis. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention, this Canuckmera came with this little bonus flying beaver thing, which I've yet to paint. You might see it in a future video. Speaking of videos, I took this same approach with this video as I did with the Canuckmera. Keep it simple and stop procrastinating. I'm really happy to be back making videos again, and I have a few really cool surprises coming up soon. And hey, I'm sure you noticed a new look to my channel, and this is a new thing I'm trying, and I'd love to know what you think in the comments. As someone with a million creative hobbies, including drawing, I'm always looking for new ways to smash my hobbies together, so having a little self-drawn avatar on my videos, why not? I have nowhere to really film B-roll of my face, so this is a great alternative. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video after such a long hiatus. Like I said, I'm so happy to be back. I have a few more videos coming up that I think you'll really like, so I'd love it if you'd like, subscribe, and all that nonsense, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!